Hey everyone, welcome to Flutter Atlanta. Thank you to those that are tuning in online and all of you guys that showed up today. Wasn't too sure if you guys were gonna make the trip with how much it was raining this morning, so glad it cleared up and you guys made the trip. My name is Emmett. I'm an engineering manager here at Black Airplane. I have a background in native Android and iOS development. Been using Flutter for over 4 years and built over 20 different Flutter apps and have several more in progress. Love Flutter so much I also use it for my own personal projects. Want to give a quick shout out to Black Airplane. Appreciate them providing the food, drinks, and this awesome space that we get to have this meetup. Black Airplane's a leading development agency here in the Southeast, and we have a special team here that produces top quality work, and we're capable of building pretty much anything these days. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about CI/CD and also maybe what you should do to choose your first CI/CD platform. So first, let's imagine you're awesome like Cardin. You've written a whole bunch of tests for your app that we talked about last talk. And if you haven't seen that talk, make sure you go watch it. It shares a whole bunch of great tips on how to write tests for your app. And then some bozo like me joins your team and pushes code directly without checking to see if any of the tests pass. And I, of course, break everything. That's why, or one of the reasons, you need CI/CD. You can protect your project. This is one of those situations where a proper CI/CD setup can require all of your developers to pass the checks before they're allowed to merge. So, what the heck does CI/CD actually mean? CI/CD stands for Continuous Integration and Continuous Deployment. So first off, what is continuous integration? It's a DevOps practice where developers regularly merge their code into some sort of central repository, and then after that, automated builds and tests are run. So why do we need this? Merging code more often with automated builds and tests results in less bugs and less time spent addressing merge conflicts. It also allows for faster code reviews. If you're going to go and try and review a piece of code that somebody else wrote, you feel a lot more confident when all the tests are passing, pass all the linting. It allows you to really just focus on what did they implement here, why did they do it this way, versus all of the small nitpicky things that can be automatically tested for. So this graph, real quick, I'm going to explain it. This is the Git workflow called trunk-based development. This is what we use here at Black Airplane. I'm pretty sure I've done a talk on this before. So what this is it's basically how we manage our Git repositories. Some other options are something called Git flow, which a lot of you may have used before. That's where you're going to have like a development branch, your main branch, your feature branches. A while ago, a lot of people decided we don't actually need that much complexity, and it's way easier to set up CI/CD pipelines if we keep it bare bones simple. So the way trunk-based development works, you have the whole team with a shared branch called trunk or master. Most of us just call it master. And then all of the developers will branch off of master. They'll write a very small feature that's really important. It should be one singular feature. It should take you less than a day to complete. And then you'll open up a pull request to merge it back in. When you go to actually make a release, you'll create a release branch off of master. And then all you would do during this phase is you're going to harden this. So you create a release. Somebody or a bunch of people are going to be testing this release, and you're just going to continue development on towards the next release. The only way anything changes on this release branch is if you find a bug. That bug is then fixed in a feature branch, merged back into master, so it's fixed for the whole code base, and then they just cherry pick that specific commit that fixed the bug onto the release branch. So that's the only way anything on the release branch changes. This is really nice because when you're on an agile team, you're moving really fast, trying to build a whole bunch of things. You don't have to stop production to create a release. We can just create a release branch and all the developers move on down the road towards the next release. So this has been proven to work really well, even for really big teams. When I first saw this, I was really caught off guard. It was like, we're all just going to merge into master. A lot of smaller teams won't even do the feature branches, and they just all merge directly onto master. But CI/CD is a very important backbone to this structure, because as soon as the build breaks on master, everybody stops everything and you fix the build. That's one of the biggest rules. So we have an automated build running, making sure our app builds. We do something that breaks it, then we have to go fix it before we do anything else. With the feature branches, that should never happen. So you may have in your continuous integration you're going to maybe make a branch here, change some code, then I go to merge it in. All of my automated builds and tests will pass before it gets merged into here, meaning it should never break. So that's the idea with continuous integration with trunk-based development. We're essentially making sure the master should always build, and we're going to run all of our automated tests before we get the code merged in. Also, always very, very small pull requests. So the other side of things, continuous deployments. What is it? It's another DevOps practice where code changes are automatically released to a production environment. And why do you need this? Releasing code more often in an automated way saves developer time and removes the pain around an occasional release. If you've ever released an app before, you know it is terribly painful. Going through app review is terribly painful. It's not necessarily easy to upload any of the builds. And the best thing that you can do is when something is very painful, do it more often. Come up with a system to make it less painful for you. And that's what continuous deployment aims to do. So if we go back to our trunk-based development, where does the continuous deployment happen? Well, I use two different workflows at Black Airplane. We have one workflow that we call a nightly. When we're building apps for our clients, we really like to have as much transparency with them as possible. So that means every single night, they're going to get an email with a new build that they can install on their devices of anything that changed that day. We're very transparent with them. It's custom software. There's a good chance half the nights the software won't even work. So if something's broken, they'll experience it. They get to see how it gets built, the whole process. So with that, every single night we'll run a workflow off of master, right? So it'll just build whatever the latest is, ship it up to them, point it at some sort of staging server. And then with the release branches, you normally will go off of tags. So if we create a release branch, we'll have 12.1, we'll create a tag, version 12.1, and then a release workflow will run. And this will actually go and deliver it to the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, which you can then submit either automated or manually from there. So to recap, CI/CD stands for continuous integration, and CD stands for continuous delivery or deployment. CI/CD is a system that helps save developers time by automatically doing things like running tests, enforcing code styles, building the applications, delivering builds to testers, and deploying builds to live environments. This is especially important in mobile development due to the long build times and complex deployment systems. But before we got the M1 chips on these Mac Minis, which is what's running on the servers for most of these CI/CD platforms, when we still had to do it on Intel-based Macs, it would not be uncommon for our pipelines to take an hour to run, which is just terrible because it had to, clone down Dart, pull down the repository, run all the tests, run an Android build, run an iOS build, and then deploy it to wherever you wanted. Now, with the M1 Mac Minis that are in most of these server farms for CI/CD, we're getting still about a 25-minute runtime, which is quite a lot. The ideal situation here is that these builds run very quickly to give the developers feedback as quick as possible so they can move on. For us, PRs do get blocked until they pass these testing requirements, so it's going to sit there. The developer is essentially going to sit there for 25 minutes while it gets manually reviewed and when these builds pass. So what are some options for CI/CD and Flutter? I have 3 of them listed here. I'm mainly going to talk about 2, and that's going to be the first 2, but I wanted to throw Bitrise on here as well because it's starting to grow in popularity, especially in the enterprise sector. But the first 2 are going to be probably the most popular. So the first one here is GitHub Actions, and the other one is Codemagic. GitHub Actions is used very widely, obviously part of GitHub, the most popular repository solution, or source code solution there is. And it integrates obviously perfect with your repository. The difficulty here is it's going to be a little more intense to set up. While Codemagic was the first ever Flutter-focused CI/CD platform that came out, and they have a really nice editor that's just click how you want it set up. So when you're learning how to do these CI/CD workflows like me, I much prefer the nice GUI to set it up versus trying to decipher a YAML setup. But let's take a look at what that actually looks like. This might be a little small here, but I'm going to try and walk you through kind of how this is happening. So this YAML workflow is from Very Good Ventures. Obviously, we've heard about them a ton now. They do so much great open source work, and they provide this for you to see. So this is essentially how you would build one of these GitHub Actions. And it's not too terribly unlike a makefile like we saw Cardin use on some of his tests. But you basically have different actions and then all the steps you want it to run. So if we look at the beginning here, the first step is going to go and check out whatever the code base is. We're going to set up Dart, have any SSH keys set up that we need. Then we're going to install dependencies, then check the formatting, run the Dart analyzer, run the tests, and then they also have checking code coverage in here. So again, you mentioned a little bit last talk about code coverage. That's another thing you can set up to block PRs from coming in if there's not enough code coverage based on tests. There's some other tools you can use for that, like codecov.io, which makes these really awesome graphs for you, puts it right there in the PR, and can tell you which files it's missing tests on. But as you can see, if you've never set up a CI/CD workflow before, this definitely looks fairly foreign. So there is an easier way with GitHub Actions. There's a huge marketplace of these, and they're pretty much a one-click install. So there's a ton of Flutter ones, of course, because Flutter is so popular now. So you can pull up the GitHub Action Marketplace and you can see different things like Dart and Flutter package publisher, test reporting, the analyzer command, all of these things. So you can pull these in and build your own workflows as well, combining some of these, or just one-click install these to make sure they pass. But for me, this is still way too much, and I personally want to have an easier way to set up the most difficult part of this, which is the deployment. With the deployment, as you guys know, you're going to have key stores for Android, you're going to have Apple signing certificates, and all of this that has to get managed. If you are expecting your CI/CD platform to actually be able to make signed versions of your apps and deploy them, they're going to need to have access to these certificates. That's a lot more complicated to set up in a GitHub action than a nice GUI where I just drag and drop my certificates in. Also, for actually publishing to the app stores, you have to go and get service accounts or API keys for the two stores to have access on a server to submit and upload those. So again, let's go over why we've chosen Codemagic for our solution. And like we said at the beginning, it's the first purpose-built Flutter CI/CD provider. They have an amazing GUI for learning about CI/CD. They still support more traditional YAML files. So just like you saw in GitHub Actions, if you want to use a YAML editor to do something very custom, you can still do that on Codemagic. The ease of setup for mobile app distribution, both for the actual stores, or we use Firebase app distribution for our beta testing, so it makes it very easy to set up there as well. You have multiple build machine options. Like I said, we mainly run on their base tier now, which is the M1 Mac Minis. They do have like the crazy Mac Pros with all the cores if you're really trying to get builds out fast. They have really great integrations with tools like GitHub and GitLab. They also have generous free tier for personal projects and individuals, and they also have invested really heavily in the Flutter community, so I want to support them for that. The first time we did a talk on Codemagic here, the CEO of Codemagic saw we were doing it and reached out and asked if we had any questions. I sent him back about a handful of questions, and he sent back a video of him actually answering all of them for us to play here. So the fact that they took the time to find our small little meetup of us here and film that, it's meant a lot to me especially. So really, really love Codemagic as a company, and also really like their service. So what does it actually look like? This is an example of a testing workflow build for one of my apps. And it's really great to decipher if something went wrong. So it walks you through very similar steps that we saw in that YAML, and it'll tell you the time that it took to run on the side. So again, you're going to have things like preparing your building machine, fetching all the app sources, installing SDKs. This is a separate or a different one from the YAML, but setting up those code signing identities that we talked about, installing all the dependencies, running your pre-test script. If you have something like code generation, you're using Freezed Build Runner, you can automatically run that before you do your testing, building Android, building iOS, publishing, and then cleaning up the build machine. So very easy to understand, very easy to see. You can see how it got started. And setting them up is just as easy. They would basically have these main sections that you're going to set it up. You have your build triggers, environment variables, what you want to do with dependency caching, so you could theoretically speed up some of these. Your custom scripts, how you want to run your tests. You can customize the commands that it runs if you want to collect things like code coverage. You'll have all your build arguments, and then distribution, what store do you want it to go to, Firebase app distribution, etc. And then notifications, they have easy integrations for hooking it up to Slack, email, anything that you want with that to notify everybody that the build went out successfully or failed. So let's take a look at the 3 workflows that I use on all of my projects. So the first one that you just saw was the testing workflow. So I have all of these set up fairly similar, but the testing workflow for us is that feature branch workflow. This is a new or updated pull request, happens when it's targeting master. And all we're going to do there is we're going to run our build runner, generate our code, run the analysis to enforce our linter, run the tests, and then build a version of the app in debug mode. Just for clarity, that analysis will fail the whole GitHub hook if it doesn't pass. So if you're not adhering to the linter, it will fail the whole workflow. So they'll have to go back and fix it, and it'll tell them what they do wrong. And then our next workflow is what we call our staging workflow, and this it could also be called the nightly workflow. And this essentially just runs nightly. So exactly the same beginning as the testing workflow, but then we always do a build and release mode, and we target whatever our staging server is, and then we upload to Firebase app distribution for testing. So again, this is the one that's going to get in our client's hands in a testing environment that's safe, not getting pushed to production anywhere or anything like that, but it is a full release build. Yep.
For the previous workflow, you build in debug mode, and I don't see it uploaded anywhere. Is that just to confirm that the build works?
Yep.
Got it.
Exactly. Cool. So the only things we're checking on the testing workflow is you adhere to the linter, the tests pass, and it still builds. Because we've had situations where the linter passes, the tests pass, and it doesn't build. So it's a lot faster to run it without the build, but you got to check it. You know, there's always going to be something weird with CocoaPods or something weird with Gradle. That's normally what's going to cause a build issue if it's passing the other two.
Maybe one more. Build in debug mode, Android and iOS?
Yep.
Okay.
And then for this one, build in release mode, a couple reasons for this. There's actually one other thing I didn't mention here, and that is how this is signed. So we do no code signing for the testing workflow, so there's no key store or signing certificate from Apple. For the staging workflow, because we deploy it to Firebase app distribution, that has to be an ad hoc signed for iOS. So we have a distribution certificate with an ad hoc setup, and that allows it to be installed on devices, not through the App Store. The pain with the ad hoc or Firebase app distribution in general is there's an invite process. Like if I wanted you to be able to download my nightly, I would send you an invite. It's going to walk you through a tutorial to install a certificate, and then it's going to ping me, the developer, saying you registered with your device identifier. Then I have to go into the App Store Connect, find my profile, and then add your identifier to it, and then re-download the profile, re-upload it to Codemagic now that it has your identifier attached to it. So this is part of the Apple ecosystem lockdown. They make it very difficult to get an app onto a phone, not through the App Store. So that's still a pain manual process, but normally when we were working with our clients, we say up front, who all do you want to be able to beta test it? We get them set up like the first or second week, and then they're good the rest of the time.
Is that process, because there's like the internal group, I'm thinking App Store Connect, there's like the internal group and then there's external. Is this the challenges with the external side of things?
Yeah, this is, so Firebase app distribution is not going to be through TestFlight, which is App Store Connect. This is a separate Firebase service. So I don't think you have the same hurdles with TestFlight, so you definitely could do that. For us, since almost all the apps we build are cross-platform, there's something nice about having our Android builds and iOS builds right next to each other in a beta distribution. But you very well could do Google Play's internal distribution and then TestFlight for iOS as well. And if that was the case, I think you would just sign it normally and upload it to the App Store and then make sure it just goes into TestFlight. And then our last workflow is the release workflow, and this runs on tag creation. Obviously, code signing is for the App Store, no longer ad hoc, so this is a normal distribution signed build. And the difference here is we're going to build in release mode targeting to the production server, and we use the version from the tag. So we have built into this workflow, you can set the version in the command line. When you do Flutter build IPA, you can actually set the version, and we pull that tag as a variable in, so it'll automatically pull it from GitHub, and then it'll sign it with that version. And then after that, it'll upload to the App Store and Google Play, assuming we've got an API access for those. If not, it'll just dump out the builds for you, and you can manually upload them. Any questions on that? Awesome. So, in conclusion, if you haven't given CI/CD a try, give it a try. Enforce your tests, enforce your linter. Even if it's just you, it can save you from doing something bad. You never know when you're going to push something and it's going to break. So always use this to double check. Give nightly workflows a try to see if Flutter updates break your project. We often keep these nightlies on for clients that we don't even work with anymore, just in case their app randomly starts not passing a build anymore. You know, if we build you an entire app and then you don't touch it for 6 months, something's likely to break. But if Flutter gets updated and it does break the build, we'll know. We can reach back out to that client and say, hey, just so you know, it's probably about time to update your app. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult if you come to us with new features in the future, because we're going to have to go fix everything before we can even get to that. If we stay proactive about it, we're going to be able to keep it updated and then tackle any new work easily. And then lastly is use the release workflows to save you 30 plus minutes of making builds and uploading them manually. It is so nice when I'm working and I'll work right up until I'm going to bed, and I don't want to stay up to upload builds for somebody to test. So right when I finish my work, I can create a new tag, build runs, and it uploads, and I can just go to sleep. Close my laptop as soon as I create that tag, and I can be confident that it'll make it up there. And if not, then I broke something and I'll look at it in the morning. But yes, thank you. I also have one piece of news before we get into any other questions. We are becoming a partner with Connect Tech, which is the largest multi-framework front-end conference in the US. It's going to be down at the Cobb Galleria. So this is going to be a really, really big tech conference, one of the biggest out there. So if you're looking for something to either speak at or attend, they're on their super early bird pricing right now. And we're finally getting Flutter a part of this. So it's super exciting if you guys want to check it out. Awesome.
Sweet.
Any questions?
Yeah, if your team's, is it using like a local Git, or are you using GitHub? GitHub for depositories? Are you able to see what your other team members are working on? Like, let's say they both see the bug at the same time. Are you doubling efforts, so they're both trying to, approach that bug?
So with the way it's set up, let me maybe pull something.
Sorry to go all the way back to
No,
the beginning.
So again, we're chugging along, right? We're making these branches, and we're assuming, because we have all of our tests passing and our nightlies, if it's here on master, it's passing all the checks and builds.
Okay.
So something would have to randomly break, like with a Flutter update, and the CI/CD will automatically default to the newest Flutter just so we can test against it. So that would be, it broke, and then I'd be like in Slack, hey, something broke on master.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I was just from a project management standpoint, I was wondering if the communication would stop people from duplicating efforts and whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for general bugs, we use a project management tool called ClickUp. So that's how we would make sure general bugs don't get double addressed. Yeah.
Did you say you're always pulling the latest Flutter release?
Latest stable, so not master, but on our Codemagic workflows, for the Flutter version, we just do stable. So if one comes out, I might not have updated my local machine yet because maybe I didn't see it, but then it'll still be testing against that on the CI/CD workflow.
Interesting. Okay.
Is Codemagic, is that like a web-based service, or is that a program you can pull down?
Yeah, so it's a web-based service, so you can just hop in right here.
Okay.
I can show you.
Kick-ass coding.
Yeah, I have that domain. Pretty sweet.
That's nice. That's badass.
But here are my beautiful failing workflows.
There's a guy in Atlanta who registered the domain of isitdoneyet.com. I was like, that's epic.
But yeah, if you want to see any of these, so like I have my pre-test script that we talked about running the build runner, which is just gonna, generate all the code. Your like release workflows in the distribution section, that's where you can set up your Android code signing, iOS code signing, make sure all of these are uploaded, and it stores all the files securely once you upload them. Here I have.
You're not going to show anything you don't want to show, right?
No, these are all, there's nothing. Once it uploads the file, it just hides it. And then this is where we would do Firebase app distribution.
Okay.
And then you can, obviously it hides the Firebase token. That would have been bad.
Listen, you're streaming, I'm just
If you can remember it in that short amount of time, you're
well, it's on, we're live recorded.
captured forever.
Yeah, somebody could steal me. But again, also not just Android, iOS, they have the support for web, Mac OS, Linux, Windows, all of that. Here it is running on that Mac OS M1 VM. And then they have the old Intel, they have Linux VMs, Windows VMs as well. So it defaults to the Mac because they assume people are building apps with Flutter. If you are not building for iOS, don't use a Mac VM. They're more expensive. Yeah, use some cheap Linux something to run these. Yeah.
Maybe a shout out for, is it called Xcode Cloud? What is the Apple thing that at least maybe maybe I'm the ideal like test case here where it just started showing up on my GitHub like CI/CD. It's like, hey, we're building this thing for you, and I was like, oh, okay, and now it also automatically uploads an archive that then it shortens my deployment process.
Nice. I actually haven't seen this.
So that's nice. Yeah, and it's building and it makes a little archive, makes it super easy.
Does it work with your Flutter tests, or is this?
No.
Okay.
And I don't know if it literally doesn't have that capability yet, or I haven't explored it deep enough. But no, like I run those tests on GitHub myself, but simultaneously this thing kicks off whenever it's emerged to main and starts building.
Nice.
So I enjoy that. I'm still manually doing it for Android, tragically, because I haven't hopped on board with one of these things you recommended.
Yes, the setting up the automatic Google Play Store, they love their service accounts over there. I don't know if you had to set one of these up. Terrible.
So confusing.
The guide changes all the time, and if normally only the account holder can set it up, so even if our client of ours gives us admin access, we can't set it up. So we're sending a highly technical guide to a not very technical client and trying to limp them through getting that set up. So Google, if you hear this, please fix your terrible service account system. Awesome. Any more questions?
Because it even has a technical person that took the better part of a day to get all it set up, the service.
I've set one up several times for Revenue Cat, and half the time I've missed granting a permission because you like set up the account first, then you grant permissions. It's a whole mess.
I appreciated a brief glimpse into the timing, like how long it took for each of the steps I think you showed.
Yeah.
Because I have long wondered, like, my Xcode build in GitHub Actions takes minutes. And these are expensive minutes, of course. And am I doing it wrong?
Yeah.
And maybe not. Now, last time I mentioned in a comment, and I'm running integration tests, which of course take also a long time. You're simulating the device, all that jazz. That's obviously where I could cut out a lot of time, but good to know that, your build also, multiple minutes there.
Yeah, and I think this one's pretty quick. We have some larger apps that we've done here that just very large amount of dependencies, large code base, and it definitely takes closer to 25 minutes for it to run. And this is 10. This is my app, super small app, really one feature set, so definitely takes a while. But you can also dig into these to actually see it run, the command, and all the logs that come out of it. Very helpful for debugging.
I'll even put arbitrary print steps in there. GitHub Actions recently, they updated their Mac OS versions, and my simulator used iPhone 13, and then suddenly that wasn't available anymore. I had to upgrade to iPhone 14, and I knew that because I printed out the list of possible simulators.
Yeah. And you're running your integration tests in GitHub Actions?
Yes, I am.
And that's why you need the device?
Right. Yes.
I would love to see how you're doing that sometime.
And I only do it on iPhone because I could never get Android to work. And I'm also open to being told that this is a bad idea. It's because I'll run out of my minutes.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that too. So.
Well, I don't know if they do. I don't think they do iPhone, but for Android, they recently rolled out that emulator suite, or I think that's the name, or Device Lab maybe, where essentially you can upload Firebase Test Lab.
Yes, I have not dabbled in this yet.
Yeah. So it does say Android and iOS apps, but essentially you can have it run on a whole bunch of different devices and run automated tests of whatever sort you need.
A future fun thing to explore.
Yeah.
For me at least.
Awesome. Any more questions?
Don't forget Google I/O next week too.
Oh yeah,
Next
Google
Tuesday.
I/O next week.
Mm.
And big
Lot of
deals
sites.
after all of the layoffs and everything. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, go check out Connect Tech. Let's pack up and we'll head down to Reformation. Thanks for